So he advised them on principles to do with international law, from Emmerich de Vattel's Law of Nations. So here the rangatira in the 1830s, 1840s, getting advice on the latest international law. And so when they declared independence, they knew, because they've been informed, that when doing this, no cession is given. And so the He Whakaputanga is carefully crafted to make sure that no cession of sovereignty is ceded. And it's based on Emmerich de Vattel's Law of Nations. So when you put all that together, and then suddenly after 1835 they declare independence, and 5 years later they cede sovereignty in perpetuity, the logic of it.
What do you think should have happened? Because the reason the legislation has gone through is because we have a democracy. With all its flaws, we have a democracy in this country.
The major flaw of democracy, Kim, is tyranny of the majority. That was identified by de Tocqueville in the previous century.
Yeah. So what are you going to do? Ditch democracy?
No, it's an imperfect ideology, but it's the best we have, and we have to work hard to make it function.
All right. And as I understand it then, the way it functioned was that the Labour government could not tolerate the perception, which was probably not what was going to happen, but the perception by the majority, the Pākehā, that Maori could get some kind of exclusivity to areas of foreshore and seabed. Consequently, they had to pass legislation to make people look as if they were stopping something that may never happen.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Okay. So that's democracy. But in the end, even though the perception is that it's confiscation, it may not be a confiscation at all, because Maori can still go to the court and claim that they have some kind of customary right over areas of foreshore and seabed. Is that not right?
No, that's not right. If you were to look around the coastline of New Zealand, where you see development, those areas are owned by Pākehā. Where you see there's no development, the chances are it's owned by Māori. If you go to, say, to Coromandel, and over the hill from Coromandel, there's a beautiful little bay that's virtually in a natural state, and that's Kennedy's Bay. That's owned by a Māori iwi. And thank goodness that it's still in its natural state. It hasn't been ruined by development. You go from Opotiki right round to Gisborne, the same there. That land belongs to Ngāti Porou, and they are negotiating with the Crown to assert their mana as guaranteed under the treaty over that land. Now, if Pākehā go there, they will go there respecting the ownership of that tribe. There are very few places now around the country where people can set up a tent along the shoreline.
And is that, you telling me, what Maori wanted?
No, I'm not saying that's what Māori want. I'm pointing out that development is setting up exclusive rights to that shoreline.
Is it, though?
Well,
you may think it is, and it may look as if it is, but it's not, actually, is it?
There are plenty of no-go areas around the coast, Kim, that the private property keep out. There's a little island offshore here where I go fishing off this island, and there's a sign there, this is private property, keep out.
You see, one of the interesting things about the origins of the foreshore and seabed legislation is in the Marlborough Sounds, the tribes there appealed because either they believed they were being closed out of marine farming, or that they believed that the marine farming was interfering with their customary fishing practices.
They didn't believe they were closed out of marine farming. They were closed out of marine farming. But they wanted to participate, and that's a reflection of the imperfection, one of the imperfections.
Will you tell me why they wanted to participate in something that they simultaneously said was destroying their customary fishing grounds?
I was about to say that that is one of the imperfections of democracy, that when the government, the Crown, devolves power to local authority to do things at the local level, Very few Māori get elected onto local bodies and regional councils. I think at one point it was 4%. Now that means that all the decision-making pertaining to that coastline is made by Pākehā councillors, and it affects Māori land. And those people felt that they wanted to get into the business of making money by running marine farms, and they weren't getting licences. And up in Northland at a place called Whangaruru, the local people there just unilaterally took it into their own hands to establish a marine farm without getting the normal resource consents under the RMA. Mm-hmm. So you get those kinds.
And adding insult to injury.
In 1877, you had Chief Justice Prendergast declare the treaty as a simple nullity. So then it was literally sat in the archives being eaten by rats for the next 100 years. So then Māori raised protests, we got the Waitangi Tribunal, and it's done a great job up to this point.
After the break, activism, a look back and moving forward.
When it comes time to see where this is going to go into legislation, you and your shitty ass bill are going down the toilet.
No introduction required. Hone Harawira and his whānau have been at the forefront of Waitangi protests for decades.
Have you ever been arrested? Yeah.
Many times, many times. I think about 30 different charges, but only one conviction. And as it happened, it was for something I didn't do.
I was there in the mid-90s when protests over a proposed fiscal cap on treaty settlements ended up with Hone throwing a punch at Sir Wera Gardner.
We ended up becoming really good friends, and I even got to speak at his memorial service.
Lovely, yeah.
That was wonderful.
I know.
Really enjoyed that.
Hey, so what's it like being up here without your mum too? I was thinking that she was so integral to it, eh?
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night actually. Yeah, it's I don't know, whenever Waitangi comes around, we always think about where is mum staying and where are the kids going to be able to know, Mama said, Mama says this, Mama says go do that, Mama this, Mama that. Well, Mama's not here anymore, eh?
So given the messaging at Ratana and at Waitangi, how optimistic are you feeling as we head into 2024?
I'm also optimistic in that the King put out the call and the major drive that came out of that was Kotahitanga. That was repeated at Ratana and picked up again at Waitangi. Yes, to challenge the Crown, yes, to have high demands of what we expect from the Crown, but to have even higher demands of ourselves. That if we are to build Kotahitanga, it may mean, gritting our teeth when it comes to some of the iwi stuff and accepting that the Māori thing is bigger than who we are individually as iwi. And that none of us are free until all of us are free.
National government's all about economy and act and all that.
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with that so you don't get swept into that whole Western idea of economy and then everything else gets ditched along the way?
I think that's the problem. I think they focus just on the economy and they don't care who falls out. We have to change that narrative within our own iwi structures and recognise that the corporate juggernaut that the Westerners built is not necessarily the best Indigenous model or the model most suited for us as Māori. But I think the other kind of energy that we should be giving most of our time to is internally. How are we looking after ourselves? How are we looking after our te pani me te rawa kore, rather than just say our job is to build an economic empire, it's the government's job to look after social welfare. Well, it's not. They are our people, and we must do our best to ensure that we bring them to at least zero so that they can participate in everything that we want for our people's future.
Very few Māori get elected onto local bodies and regional councils. I think at one point it was 4%. Now that means that all the decision-making pertaining to that coastline is made by Pākehā councillors, and it affects Māori land. And those people felt that they wanted to get into the business of making money by running marine farms, and they weren't getting licences. And up in Northland at a place called Whangaruru, the local people there just unilaterally took it into their own hands to establish a marine farm without getting the normal resource consents under the RMA. Mm-hmm. So you get those kinds of contradictions. Māori people want to be part of that political economy, but the goodies are not being handed out to them. So that's why those people in the top of the South took the matter to court.
So you can see no conflict between saying we want our customary fishing grounds to be protected from the ravages of aquaculture at the same time as wanting to be more involved in the profits and commerce of aquaculture.
Aquaculture doesn't necessarily ravage the coastline.
I'm not suggesting that, but this is what the Confederation of Tribes at the top of the South Island was saying.
No, they actually want to participate. They want to generate income too and work for their people.
So when they say they were worried about the impact of agriculture on the customary fishing grounds,
the role of 300 pupils.
The customary fishing
they
rights
come from the busy township and the farms of the district. Some by
did that
bus
have any environmental
horses.
Commentary, or was it simply them saying, we want a piece of the action and we're entitled to it?
Well,
the native schools,
there's two things
out
going
of the
on there. One,
playbook.
they wanted a piece of the action. That was
That's
the real
quite clear
purpose of
in
it.
terms of
the other, of
legislation
course,
that
is
it was
that they had no
an
say
active
in
removal
where the licence
of Te Reo Māori in schools, and that it was enacted in physically violent ways.
It was an active campaign against us, and it was state-sponsored terrorism.
The Manutahi School is administered by the Native Schools branch of the Education Department.
Native school. The name of the school itself gave you some clear indication of the status that was put on those learning institutions.
The morning classes begin, and for the infants, learning to read is the beginning of knowledge.
Will you find birds? See if you can find it there.
And that terminology was used right throughout the Maori schools in New Zealand. Now, how many children would have gone through there at that time? Thousands. That was a whole generation. They suffered corporal punishment because they spoke their own language.
Every whānau probably does have that story. It might have been their grandparents or their great-grandparents or their great-great-grandparents.
I roto i a mātou o Taranaki, I reira no ngā kui e kōrero ana mō o rātou mātua I mauherengia I te kore whakai ki te tuku I a rātou tamariki ki te kura. Nā te mea kāre rātou ngā mātua I hiahia kia kite I a rātou tamariki e patua ana mō te rā reo I a rātou.
So there's an articulation of a grand idea. Te whakamininga o ngā hapu is the grand idea of the Declaration of Independence, because they knew, on the advice of Busby and others, you can't claim independence unless you have a coherent body that does the claiming. So they got the rangatira together and formed Te Whakamininga o ngā hapu. Now, there's lots of words for a hui, or meetings in Māori, runanga, hui, all these, but whakamininga is a high-level kind of meeting, almost at the spiritual level. It refers to the coming together of the divine will with the human will.
You know, the struggles of our Pākeke to bring us to where we are today. There are a number of hapori who have recreated Generation 1 from nothing. That is a significant step in the right direction.
Ko rātau I mōhio a kune, ka kitea ngā hua o te reo Māori, o ngā tikanga Māori, o te ahurea Māori, ko tā tātou he titiro ki te ahu ngā whakamua.
He nui aku tūmanako mo tō tātou reo Māori. Tuatahi me tangata whenua anō te reo Māori I tēnei whenua. Ka rongo tātou katoa I tōna reka.
Ko ngā tamareke kei runga I te pōro whawhi.
Nō reira ko te haipapa ki a tātou, te hunga mātau ki te kōrero Māori, te hunga I kōrero Māori ana, ko te tōtō mai I ngā whānau, kia au kaipō anō te reo ki roto ki a rātau, kia au kaipō anō te reo ki roto ki o rātau kāinga.
Ko wai kei runga I te tarere.
Ka tō ngā tangata E ki ana he Māori rāta me kōrero Māori. O karu poti mai koe, kākāriki mai ki rane o karu ohara ne. Mena ke te ki koe he toto Māori o, e whaka Māori ana koe I a koe ke te ki koe he Māori koe akāsi tēnā, tauri mai ki te reo nei. Ko te ao Māori tēnei te haere nei.